Hey guys, today I want to talk about factor by grouping. So we've done factoring with grouping. So we've done one of the methods that we've used for factoring is called AC with grouping. So you have to split the middle term into two pieces, and then you do grouping. So I have talked about this before. But in this section, we're just talking about pure grouping. So it's when you start with four terms. So notice in all of the previous questions with factoring, we've had three terms. With factor by grouping, we're going to have four terms. We start with four terms. So a lot of times this will be for a third degree polynomial. A lot of times third degree polynomials are not factorable, but one way that they often can be factorable is with factor by grouping. So if you ever have to try and factor a third degree polynomial, so cubic polynomial, the thing you want to try first is always going to be, factoring out the greatest common factor is always the first thing that you do. And then after that would be factor by grouping. So first thing again, I would say, so I would look at this and say, can I factor out a greatest common factor? I look at these numbers, and the first three are divisible by 5, but the fourth one's not, so that doesn't work. These three are divisible by 2, but this one's not, so that doesn't work. So I don't think that we can factor out a greatest common factor here. So I'm just going to go straight into grouping. So with grouping, what we do is we look at the first two, and then we look at the second two. So we kind of split the problem in two, and we just look at this piece and then this piece separately. So we're going to be factoring out the greatest common factor of just these two, and then the greatest common factor of just these two. So again, we've done this in previous videos, but this one is just pure factor by grouping without the whole AC part of it. So we're not having to find things that multiply to one thing and add to something else. We're not doing that. We're just doing pure grouping here because we already have four terms. If you already have four terms, the thing that you should go to is factor by grouping. Okay. So that being said, let's do it. So I'm looking at these two, and I'm looking for what do they have in common. Well, they have x's in common, and so I'm going to pull out the lowest exponent, that amount of x's. So I'm pulling out x squared, because if I divide this by x squared, that's going to divide evenly. If I tried to pull out an x cubed, dividing this by x cubed, I end up with a negative exponent, and I don't want that. So I'm going to be pulling out an x squared. So one of the factors I'm going to be pulling out is an x squared. I'm also going to be pulling out something that goes into both 25 and 20. So what goes into both 25 and 20? Well, 5 does, right? So, yeah. So 5 goes into both 25 and 20. So that's what I'm going to factor out. I want to factor out the biggest thing that goes into both. And in this case, that would be 5, because 5 times 5 is going to give me 25, and 5 times 4 is going to give me 20. So 5x squared is what I'm pulling out of the first two. So then to figure out what goes in my parentheses, I need to divide each term by 5x squared. So I'm dividing by 5x squared. So 25 divided by 5 is 5. And then x to the third divided by x squared. Remember, we just subtract the exponents. So 3 minus 2 is just 1. So that's just x to the 1, or I don't even have to write it because it's a 1. I don't have to write 1 when it's an exponent. And to check to make sure that I've done this correctly, I can multiply it back out and see if I get this. So 5 times 5 is 25. X squared times x is x cubed. So this is correct. All right, now we do the second one. I'm dividing this by 5x squared. 25 divided by 5 is 4. So I'm going to put plus 4. X squared divided by x squared is just 1, so I don't have to write anything. Or x to the 0, right? X squared divided by x squared is x to the 0, which is just 1. So I don't have to write that. So that is all for the first part. Then for the second part, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say, what does 30x and 24 have in common? Well, they don't both have an x, so I can't pull that out. But what numbers do they have in common? Well, they're both divisible by 6. They're both divisible by 6. And if you're having trouble thinking about it, for the second one, you can actually kind of help yourself out, because we're trying to get the same thing in parentheses for the second one as we got for the first one. So since I have a 5 here, I want to have a 5 here in my next parenthesis. So I'm trying to think, what times 5 would give me 30? Well, that's 6. And so now I just need to see, will the 6 go also into 24? It does. So 6 is what I'm looking for. So I want to pull out a 6 in this question. Also, that's the biggest thing that goes into both 30 and 24. But if you're having trouble figuring that out, that might be a good way to see it, is saying, okay, what times this number would give me this number? Well, that would be 6. Or what times this number gives me that number? Again, that would be 6. So that's what we want to do. So we're pulling out a 6. That's our greatest common factor. So we're going to do 30 divided by 6 is 5. And then we don't have an x here, so this x just comes along. And then plus 24 divided by 6 is 4. And again, this parenthesis matches this parenthesis, which is what we want. So then with grouping, we then pull out the parenthesis. So we're going to bring the parenthesis out in front. So we're going to have 5x plus 4. And then in a second parenthesis, we're going to put the thing in front of the first parenthesis plus the thing in front of the second parenthesis. So that's 5x squared plus 6. And so this is the factored form of this. Okay, so this second line here is the answer. This is the answer to what we're looking for. So let's do one more example of that. So let's look at this one and do one more example. So we're going to do this pair, and this pair. So first I'm looking for what does 7 and 8 have in common? What factors do they have in common? Well, none. 7 is prime, so its only factors are 1 and 7, which 1 doesn't help us, and 7 doesn't go into 8. So I can't pull out a number, but I can pull out v squared. Remember, I'm going to pull out the lowest exponent. So if I had a v to the 5 plus v cubed, then I would pull out a v cubed, or v to the third, because that's the lowest exponent. So I'm always just going to pull out the lowest exponent. So that would be v to the cubed, v squared plus 1. V cubed divided by v cubed is 1. V to the 5th divided by v cubed, 5 minus 3 is 2. So whenever you have variables, you're going to pull out, if they're the same variable, you're going to pull out whatever the smallest exponent is. So this is just an example. This is not what's going on here. This is just an example for that kind of thing. So we're going to pull out a v squared. And again, we can't pull out a number here, so v squared is all we're pulling out. So we're going to do 7v cubed divided by v squared. So we don't have a number, so it's just 7. And then v cubed divided by v squared, 3 minus 2 is just 1. So that's just v to the first power, but I don't have to write the 1. And then plus, there's no number, so the 8 just comes. And then v squared divided by v squared is v to the 0, which is 1, so I don't have to write it. Because when I multiply by 1, it doesn't change anything. So that's that. Now I need to do this pair. So I'm looking for what do 49 and 56 have in common. Well, remember, I want my next parenthesis to be the same. So is there something I can multiply by 7 to get 49? Well, yes, that would be 7, right? 7 times 7 is 49. So does 7 also go into 56? Yes. 8 times 7 is 56. So 7 is what I'm looking for. So I'm going to pull out a 7 here. I'm going to pull out a 7. Then I'm going to divide each of these by 7, right? So if I divide this by 7, I'm going to get 7v. If I divide 56 by 7, I'm going to get 8. So again, my parentheses are the same, so I've done this correctly. So I get v squared plus 7v plus 8. Oh, that's the opposite order than I did it last time. It doesn't really matter, but I want to be consistent so I don't confuse anybody. So let's write what we had in parentheses first, like I did on the last example. And then what was in front of the first parenthesis plus what's in front of the second parenthesis. And that is factor by grouping. So hopefully that helped. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video.